What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Daily Fix on Fantasy and Frames. I'm your host, Keith Fleming, joined by two of my favorite people on this planet, Joe the Brain Matz and Nate. I'm going to win a third straight Super Bowl because I'm an asshole. Markham. Damn Chiefs, they make me sick. But on the other side, we are going to break down the DFS slate, talk all four games, our favorite plays, etc. We'll see you in a second. Well, we are back. Nate, what's going on, man? Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I love jumping on it. In fact, I got out of the day off early and a couple plans for tomorrow, but never
going to the game, Joe.
Oh, wow.
Couple of plans.
Okay, yeah. Small plans.
Small plans, yeah. So it was nice today in St. Louis. So the weather's been cooperative. We'll see how tomorrow has. At least there won't be frostbite and losing digits like last year's game.
I saw that article again pop up where it was a lot worse than I remember. It's like 13 people, right? Like, got severe frostbite where they lost like limbs and stuff.
Yeah, I had people at the game who, and like, hyperbole, everybody says, "Oh, I got my beer and it was frozen before I could take a drink," but it was legit. They said that by the time they came down from the concessions, it had halfway frozen and they drank half of it, and there was nothing. You couldn't do anything about it because you were trying to warm it with your hands, but then your hands were even colder. But no, it's gonna be a nice day and afternoon. So
you could not pay me, Nate. I don't think any amount of money, like people that know me know, I do not like being cold. There's like it can be 200 degrees. I'm good. Mm-hmm. The minute it's below 30, I don't even want to step outside. I could not imagine going and sitting somewhere like that for 3.5, 4 hours. It's so cold. They say if you don't put cardboard down on the floor, your feet will freeze upward. Is that true, Nate?
Not at all.
Okay. Okay.
But it is. I will say that is the one area that does get you is the concrete that you're standing on the whole time, and they do allow 3x5. They allow a cardboard section for your area that you can bring in. We're not doing that. It won't be that bad, but it's been cold, man. We went to a game probably 2 or 3 years ago. And it was so cold that by the time we left, we wanted to get back to the hotel, and we get back in like the heat in the hotel room because I got some shoddy ass room, which I never do. I'm usually spend up, be cautious, but this was throw caution to the wind, and we couldn't. Carrie and I mean, just frozen. Like our feet were still so cold that we couldn't ever warm. So we got up at I think it was like 4 o'clock in the morning and said screw it. And we went and sat in the car and then just drove home that morning. So tomorrow will be a blessing by comparison.
My dad always tells the story of him and my mom have been married a few years, and the Falcons were playing the Cowboys in the playoffs. He's going out with his best friend. This is like the late 70s. And they go to the game. They said they have pictures that they arrived there in shorts. It was like 70 degrees. And the weather forecasts and stuff were not as good as, today. Mm-hmm. He said they woke up 2 days later and it was like 30 degrees. So with the wind chill, it felt like 20. They literally took like blankets and sheets from the hotel to the game. My mom ends up like for almost the entire second half waiting it out in the women's bathroom because there was heat in there. And in typical Falcons fashion, they were up 17, knocked out Staubach, and the Cowboys back up, led them back to a quarter victory. Danny White. And it's just, again, being a Falcons fan is tough. And he said it was miserable. And that's nothing like what an average Chiefs playoff game is. Like, I don't know how you guys do it. Joe, which game are you most excited for this weekend?
I mean, it's got to be Bills Ravens.
Yeah.
I mean, that feels like it like it's obviously not the Super Bowl because Kansas City still exists, number one. And then I think obviously Detroit and Philly feel pretty good about their chances on the other side, but I mean, it's the one game where it's like these are two true Super Bowl caliber teams playing each other with the two guys everyone's been arguing about over the last month about who the MVP is.
If not the best QBs, the two scariest QBs in the NFL.
At this moment, it would be hard to argue otherwise. Obviously, if we're a fourth quarter game on the line, I think most of us are still defaulting to Patrick Mahomes.
Oh, if it's a game for my life, I'd still rather have Mahomes.
Yeah.
Like, he's done it too much. I mean,
but yeah, for the pure ridiculousness of some of the things those guys have done. I mean, Josh Allen has a receiving touchdown to himself thanks to that Amari Cooper toss.
His stats in the playoffs are insane too. Like you take away the Bengals game where he was bad, but outside of that, he has been incredible and
he's been awesome.
Game he's played. That's the difference in him and Lamar thus far. Is Lamar has not had a good performance in this round. He's had some great wild card, but the divisional rounds have been shaky. Ironically, I think that's the game that the Ravens can easily win it, but they better lean on Derrick Henry. Like that's how they win that game. I truly do. Is you just force feed Henry and then let Lamar and, Justice Hill get theirs when they can and play action. And just, I don't know if Buffalo can, straight up stop Baltimore's rushing attack, especially with like the new wrinkle that they've added with Henry and the Wildcat and Lamar in motion. You want to talk about terrifying. They're like, oh, by the way, Bills, here's something for you to marinate on for the next 6 days. But I also just think that's two of the best offensive coordinators in football that people don't talk about quite as much as Todd Monken and Joe Brady have been incredible this year.
Yeah, the one area, like when I'm picking the winner of the game, the last 4 or 5, maybe 6 weeks now, Baltimore's defense has just taken that next step, coming from an area of just poverty as far as pass,
especially against the pass,
goes. And they've really shored that up. And I don't know if that's just, is it a culmination of the teams they've played and the fact that they've been able to establish such a great dominant round game? But that's the one key element that I think that we know both teams are going to score. We know I think taking, I'll never say take the over or under in a game like in the playoffs. I hate ever making those recommendations for this two team, especially. But if there was a game that could see a 50+ point total, it wouldn't shock me if it's this matchup.
No, especially not the way you got so many guys that can break these, huge plays. Let's just start here. We don't have to go in order. We'll do the Ravens, and we're just this week. We're just going to go through the games and talk about kind of the game scripts, and then we can kind of price people in. So we're all on board of saying Derrick Henry, despite the $8K price tag, it's hard not to play him, right?
100%. I mean, obviously, you can.
The simplest thing from the first game.
Simplest thing is just go back and look at what he did earlier this season against the Bills. Obviously, that was a while ago, and that was in Baltimore, which is probably the biggest difference. But for a Bills team that we've been saying ad nauseum over the last few years, always a good defense. But the way you can come after them is you just pound them in the run because they always want to be in nickel. And that's what worked then. I know that in FTN's open field rankings, which is looking at yardage given up outside of the first 10 yards to running backs.
That's basically tackling at that point.
Yeah,
right?
It really is just tackling. They're 31st. Only Tennessee was worse.
That's not good.
And that's, when you're talking about Derrick Henry, especially,
or Lamar. I mean, it's not like it's any easier.
Right. And that's why the scariest thing for Bills fans is just got to be if they go down early, especially if they're down in the second half and it's by more than one score. Obviously, you have Josh Allen. You're never out of it.
Right.
But it's kind of like how last week we're like, this Denver defense is good, but this Bills offense just matches up perfectly against them. There's no number one receiver for Surtain and take out, blah, blah, blah. And this week, it feels like it's reversed, where it's like, the Bills. And honestly, this Bills defense is not as good as the last few years. But it's kind of like what they want to do matches up so poorly against this Ravens offense.
But don't you think it could be poor for Baltimore if Buffalo gets up early? Because that's when they're at their best, is when they can just basically send Von Miller and attack. Lamar has been great this year versus the blitz, but we've seen in previous playoffs, right? Like a little bit of what, I hate to compare him to Sam Darnold last week, but I've seen Lamar look like that in a few playoff games where he just can't, make any accurate passes down the field. He's had no issues this year. So like, I don't expect that to happen, but if I was Buffalo, that's to me the best thing that could happen for them. Because the other issues, I think they're going to have a really hard time running on Baltimore's defense outside of Allen. Obviously Josh can get his right, but I do have concern about like James Cook and the actual rushing attack, which was great last week.
That's going to be the one thing that I think we'll definitely focus on. And I think many of the divisional rounds, many of the playoff games say which team can establish the run first. And that team usually will have a little bit of a leg up. But the last time they played each other, when he did put up the $1.99, that was without three key pieces to that Buffalo defense.
Milano didn't play right.
Milano, Terrell Bernard, Taron Johnson. So all three of those guys being back. Does that mean that they're going to stop Derrick Henry? No, I really don't believe so. But does that mean that I should, bank that it's going to be such easy sledding as it was before? No, not really. But doesn't take away from the fact that even with or without Milano, Terrell Bernard, Taron Johnson, Lawrence Taylor, Ray Lewis, and a few others, I'm still starting Derrick Henry in this matchup.
Yeah, cold weather, late in the season. I mean, Joe Matt talks about this every year. December on is Henry time. I mean, it's insane how his stats just go up each month into the season. He's one of the few running backs. He's averaging over 5 yards per carry in the playoffs, despite I think he's now at well over 200 carries. I do wonder about Cook. I really like both of the secondary backs this week a lot in this game, like Ty Johnson and Justice Hill, because both of these defenses are very bad defending running backs out of the backfield. We saw it in the first matchup with Justice Hill, I think catching like 5 balls for 70 yards and a touchdown. And then, with Ty Johnson, I think we'll get an uptick in carries overall because it looks like Ray Davis is going to miss due to the concussion. And we've seen him, I think catch like 11 passes for over 200 yards and 2 scores in his last 5. They're using him a lot more out of the backfield. And again, this is a Baltimore team giving up over 5 receptions, over 40 yards each game to opposing backs out of the backfield. If you want to play Henry, which I am in a lot of lineups, if you pair him, you avoid taking one of the other expensive options. Hill's 4,800, Johnson's 45 or 46. It still allows me to play McLaurin Daniels, to play Sam Laporta at tight end, to spend up on positions. And I don't love too many of the other matchups. The only guy that I think has a great matchup is Barkley. And obviously you can't play both. I mean, you can play both of those running backs, but it really limits what you can do with the rest of your lineup. So I like those secondary pieces. And then the pass catcher that I keep coming back to, because overall I'm staying away from these receivers.
Right.
But I do like Keon Coleman. He runs a ton of go routes. That is the one route that Baltimore, even during this good stretch, they're getting burned on those plays. And they could use Cooper for it. But this season, me and Akams was talking about this, I think, today on ESPN. Coleman has ran like 80% of the go routes for the Buffalo Bills this week. So if he does that, and that's a route he's been good on this year, I think that he can make some big plays. And Buffalo is going to need to move the ball through the air and have big plays, I feel like, to keep up again, because Baltimore just has such an advantage with their run game.
Yeah, I'll tell you the one thing, too, I think that really makes me like the Keon Coleman play is that if you're Buffalo, one of the things you're going to obviously want to do is try to spy on Lamar Jackson, and that might not be exclusively at the linebacker position. They may bring Taylor Rapp up and play him more near the line of scrimmage or up in the box, which is a dangerous flipping the exact team. Sorry.
Yeah,
I start going on a tangent about over the top, thinking about on the other side too. But the same thing goes with stopping Josh Allen or vice versa. Is what do the opposing defenses do for teams? If you're going to find a receiver in this matchup, it's not going to be, I think, I'm looking for a 25% target rate guy, because
they run single high safety at like 40% of the time since week 9. And to me, that it screams, whether it's Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel, Amari Cooper, like the Bills do have several like good deep targets, guys that can make these big explosive plays. I just love the fact that me and Akan's pointing out that he has been their go route guy. And that is the one, thing that Baltimore has struggled with from the beginning to the end of the season, is that it kind of the go and corner routes.
No, yeah, I think you're right about Coleman, where the Ravens defense just DVOA 8th against the pass, but 28th against deep passes on the season. So that is the place to try to attack them.
4,100 too. Like that's going to help you, spend up somewhere else. And I feel pretty confident about it. I forgot he had some really big games. Like he didn't have a lot of them, but I mean, he scored 11 points or more in 4 games, right. 2 games of 18 points or more,
And then he also has the 4th highest target difference between man and zone according to PFF's tracking.
Wow. Like
and Baltimore runs the 8th most amount of man. So he is kind of the one of the best deep shot plays you can have. Really outside of, I think, you can just kind of take your pick in the Washington-Detroit game and you might hit on something. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I think, he is my top target for those lower priced wide receivers where you can save up some money.
Tight ends. Do you guys have any desire to play any of them? I don't hate any of them. I just like guys in other games. Isaiah Likely is the one guy I kept coming back to. Again, if Zay Flowers is out, if Baltimore does have to throw more, we've just seen when Flowers has been out, or they will go to him. They use him as a wide receiver sometimes too. He's kind of intriguing to me, and I might end up putting him in some lineups. But again, I like a lot of, there's some really good tight end matchups, or you can get like Laporta, who's getting a ton of volume, and it's, they're not, none of those guys are like overly priced. I mean, Travis Kelce's fucking 5,000. I had a heart attack when I saw that this week.
Right.
No, yeah, it's like the Ravens defense is kind of susceptible to tight ends, but it's just, are you really going to go the Kincaid route?
Trust that duo? I know I can't.
Yeah, we're on 6 straight weeks of under 10 points for him. And then, and then just to circle back, because I think it's an important point where, you mentioned obviously the same thing was true for Baltimore as is with Buffalo, where falling behind is the scary thing. Mm-hmm. And I think the key there is Todd Monken's just got to stick to his guns, because that's kind of where they lost their way last year.
Absolutely where they lost their way last year.
Where obviously, maybe Zay Flowers holds onto that ball, they get in the end zone. Maybe it would have worked out anyway. Fair. But it was bizarre the way that they just went all in on passing the ball when Kansas City was much more susceptible to the run throughout last season. Mm-hmm. And I would say the same thing here. And, obviously if you get down like 17 somehow, and it's the second half, you just got to pass. But any other situation, stick to that original game script. There's no reason to alter what you do when what you do has been so insanely efficient. Yeah. So
feed the beast, Joe. Don't overthink this. Lamar can end up, having his moment, whether it be the AFC Championship game, the Super Bowl. I'm going to be mad. And I'm Georgia, Todd Monken's my guy. He brought me 2 titles. Great play caller. But because he was so great all last year. And I thought his game plan for that AFC title game was just crazy. Divisional title game, wasn't it? What was it?
No, it was
AFC. That's right. Cause I got it involved. Let's move on to the KC Houston game. I want to start with what I just said. Travis Kelce is 5,000. And I know that it has been a rough road. And again, for expectations and what he's done in the past, he still ended up having a great year. If you look at it, he was one of the best tight ends in football across the board. But I just want to go through, because I wanted to look this up, because I'm like, does Kelce always turn it on? Yeah, he does, is the answer to that. 2019, 3 games, 22 targets, 19 receptions, 207 yards, 4 touchdowns. 2023 games, 40 targets, 31 receptions, 360 yards, 3 touchdowns. 2021, 27 targets, 23 receptions, 299 yards, 3 touchdowns. 2022, 31 targets, 27 receptions, 257 yards, and 4 touchdowns. And then last year, 37 targets, 32 receptions, 355 yards, 3 touchdowns. His last 5, he's averaging just over 10 targets, 8.8 receptions per, just under 100 yards, and over a touchdown. More impressively, since Tyreek Hill has gone, that number jumps to 11 targets, nearly 10 receptions, over 100 yards per game, and over a touchdown. I know that people probably are a little bit hesitant because he's burned me in several lineups this year where I've had great days and Kelsey was a lot lower price than what you're used to, and he'd have 7-8 points. But at $5,000, I gotta pull the trigger with this history in a majority of my lineups. And if I'm wrong, but this is Travis Kelce. This is the playoffs. I think they've been saving him. I think Xavier Worthy is in the same boat, that you're going to see some new wrinkles with him, that his usage went up. I kind of like this Chiefs passing attack versus Houston. I mean, Ladd cooked these guys last week. I know that they did a great job getting pressure, but I think Mahomes is going to have a very good day. That's great for Kelce, Worthy. If you want to say it's DeAndre Hopkins, like, you could convince me almost any of the wide receivers is like that, 1B or 1C, but I still think it's going to be Kelsey's show where they're going to get the ball to him early and often.
Yeah, go back to week 16 and look at that matchup last time they faced Houston, and that was one of the things they were focused on, is making sure that the pass rush didn't get to Mahomes, and the way they did that is, targeting Kelsey 7 times, getting the ball, targeted to Xavier Worthy 11 times, and a lot of those, some of the gadget plays, but quick release design plays where you don't have to worry about the breaking down of the offensive line. And nice thing is that Humphreys is supposed to play, even though he's not the ideal person you want protecting Patrick, but
it's an upgrade of what at your back. Yeah.
It's an upgrade over the 3 of us standing around trying to stop somebody. But that's the key matchup for me, is that pass rush. And it's as dangerous as there is in the NFL. So the good news is that the Texans are just garbage, and if I could do anything,
what's up, Colby?
I'm gonna do my best to throw things at the Texans players and hope to injure them before the game starts. So that's my
plan. You want to be a Philly fan all of a sudden, huh, Nate?
Yes, yeah, exactly. I'd get banned for I would not for a divisional game, not in a what is it?
How shocked were you seriously to see 5K next to Kelsey, Joe? Because it's been like, I remember the days when we would have a dance party when he was at 6K.
Sure. I mean, obviously the playoffs are always a little bit different, where that pricing moves in ways that we don't always like. I remember last week we're kind of like looking at the tight ends, and it was like, oh, this guy's 4,300, and then it's like, well, they were all like, almost all of them were like 4,000, like 4,500, because it's like you only have the 12 guys to choose from.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, considering for years and years and years, it was, if we can get Travis Kelce at the price of the 5th wide receiver, we're going to automatically do it.
About like the 10th.
Now he's way down, and it doesn't feel automatic. I mean, I definitely like the play, but there's also a chance that I'm like, I gotta, get Saquon or Derrick Henry in here, and so maybe I'm going cheaper at tight end. I mean, yeah, it's cliche to say about any football game, but it really just feels like whether this game is close, it just all depends on how the line play goes. Because if Houston is getting after Mahomes,
both sides too, right?
Yeah,
what you think? Yeah,
because I would have some concern if I'm a Kansas City fan about the pass rush, but at the same time, if I'm a Houston fan and I'm looking at how my team looked last week before they kind of got to the lead and
defense took over. Yeah,
they were so lost on like every stunt for the first 25 minutes of that game that the Chargers ran. And now you're getting Steve Spagnuolo, and it's just like, feels like disaster waiting to happen. Now, if they hold up, Nico Collins, I think, could again have a huge game because he's awesome. And this Kansas City defense has not been as good down the stretch. But if there's no time, it doesn't matter. So I feel like, and he's the only guy I'm really looking at on the Texans that I would consider playing.
No Schultz. Chiefs give
You're right.
I'm
forgetting Schultz. Schultz. You're right. Schultz is a reasonable play.
I think he's 3,300.
He is the cheap play at tight end this week because Likely is above him. So yeah, if you're going cheap at tight end, it is Schultz because Kansas City has been awful at covering tight ends.
Yeah, second best game of the year, 5 for 45 and a touchdown in the first matchup.
But yeah, I mean that's the scary thing is at that price it doesn't matter. But yeah, best game of the year, you're like 5 for 45 and a touchdown. So it's like
second best.
Second best. So it's like there's limited upside, but it's like if he gives you that is fine because you're paying nothing for him.
And most of that came after Dell was injured, which again is even more reason that he's probably targeted more in this matchup, I'm assuming. Nate, how worried are you about Joe Mixon? Is there any chance that the Texans can run it? I mean, y'all have been one of the best run defenses in the NFL. I mean, do you think they should be able to handle Mixon? Because that's going to, in my opinion, be the key. Is the Texans got to be able to at least run it to where they can get some first downs each drive and hopefully open up that play action pass.
Yeah, I mean, not being 100% helps because Joe Mixon is obviously any time that you go up against someone that has that potential, especially to break one, because that's what's going to separate this game when it's going to be close. I'm not going to say, I don't think this 8-point spread is a good number. I think that we're probably talking more of a field goal unless like you touched on earlier, Joe, the offense, just they don't look right at whole. And if that's the case, the Chiefs are quick to come playoff time, try to put their foot onto the throat and actually accelerate much more than they do during the regular season, which is almost a don't make mistakes and just get the W, which is a sound strategy. Boring as all hell. No one likes it from a fantasy standpoint. Like, to be fair, I don't know if there's players outside of, I think Dalton Schultz is the one guy with Nico in certain lineups here and there. Of course, I think you can try to fit him in. And Kelsey, that's about all I really want. I don't know which person can take a gamble and say, yeah, DeAndre.
You don't have any interest in Worthy? Because I do like him at 5,100 because he's got so much upside. He's the kind of guy that can, he scored like 5 of his last 7. I love the fact that he was so much more involved late. And again, you brought it up. I mean, this was the game he saw the most targets he did all season. I believe he had the most receptions he had in any game this season. It was, I believe, the most receiving or second or third most receiving, like across the board. This was one of his best games, and I think they're going to kind of duplicate that. I do worry about that they've got so many guys now. Like we talked about how Kansas City didn't have any pass catching options after the Rice injury. Now you got DeAndre Hopkins, who's going to be great for. It's turned into more of the shorter stuff, intermediate, that they go to Hopkins. But Hollywood Brown is the guy that actually, ironically, seems to sort of unleash this offense because the 2 games he's played in, those are the second and third highest points y'all scored all season in games. Right. The offense looked really good versus good defenses that they played in both of them. And he was targeted a lot. I mean, they targeted him 17 times in his 2 games that he played.
That's the role that they, if there's a carved out, pie chart for the receivers and playmakers, the role that Hollywood Brown occupies is usually the largest piece of the pie outside of Travis Kelce. It's safe, and it's usually what the defense is giving you. And Xavier Worthy is more than capable of doing that, of having a carved out role that can, his upside, Hollywood Brown's upside, let's be fair, is, high target volume, low yards, and you hope he gets in the end zone. Not as concerned with him having a big broken play like you would with Worthy. I just think that you hit the nail on the head. There's so many options that you don't know. And if the defense takes away one of them, it's not going to be a force feed situation like on the other side of the ball. I think it'll be a force feed Nico, no matter what. If they have McDuffie and then they shadow him, or they blanket him with a safety, or they move linebackers over.
They just don't have any other options. I mean, they've lost. You think about, you lose Dell and Diggs. I mean, those are 2 legit. Susie's got a question for you, Nate. How you feel about the bye week lull, and which players are you worried about shaking off the rust? Hashtag Chiefs suck. Is that Colby's wife? Because if so, that is fantastic.
It is.
Susie, I haven't met you yet, but I am a big fan. I just want to let you know that. Well done.
Not
you too, Colby. I can already tell you married up, bro.
She the first thing she did is, then really not the first thing she did when I met her, but one of the first interactions we really had, which was a nice icebreaker after we had already met each other, is that at the Kings Classic draft, they came in mid draft of mine, and I had Jared Goff for like $3 or whatever it was. And the first thing, she looked at my sheet of my names and said, "That's a terrible pick," and basically just left it at that, which rightfully so. I understand the whole, she's a big Rams fan, a huge Rams fan. So that's where that came from. And yes, to answer the question though, the bye week lull, this is something Kansas City's not used to, having bye weeks before the playoffs. So I don't know how they're going to ever recover from this. This is so out of the norm for them.
I was about to be like, okay, sarcasm. Because for a second, I'm going, have they ever not? Because last year was the first year, right, that they didn't have a bye? Was it last year, right? Because they played, I saw they played 4 games last year.
Right. Yeah.
And every other year they played 3, going all the way back to 2019 when I did those 5 years.
I hate the bye week lull excuse. I remember that year where Green Bay lost to the Niners in that snow game.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just saw a bunch of Packers fans tweeting, posting about, oh, the bye week screwed us.
They learned it from us, Joe.
They scored a
Green Bay
touchdown
beat Atlanta. That's what I said.
They scored a touchdown in their first drive. The only touchdown they scored was on the very first drive.
I think
it wasn't because they were rusty. It's because Rodgers played bad and they played a really good defense in the snow. It's like, don't give me these excuses. It's football. I mean, the college game, I'll give a little bit to that idea that maybe the bye week was bad for some of those teams as opposed to hosting a team you were way better than, because that break is also longer, and it's college kids. There's just more variables. These are pros. The week off is helpful. Like,
now,
Andy Reid, if anyone has proven the week off is helpful, it's Andy Reid.
It has been since Christmas. Since
that's true.
The majority of the players, but at the same time, you're right.
Oh, that's fair. I didn't think about that.
It's a longer.
No, that's a good question.
But I mean, it is. It's Andy Reid. It's Patrick Mahomes. It's Travis Kelce. It's Chris Jones. And
it's Steve Spagnuolo too.
And it's Steve Spagnuolo. Exactly.
Don't give those guys more time. We've seen what happens.
One more thing with this game, and then we'll move on to our third game. I'm playing Patrick Mahomes places. I can't believe at $6K
at that price
he's projected for no ownership. It's Patrick Mahomes. We know he always runs more in the playoffs. That's a given. Like I always forget how much he runs until a game matters. And he's running all over doing that stupid shit he does where he looks like he's going to go out of bounds and he gets 20 more yards. I'm like, this dude's too damn good with damn dad bod driving me nuts. His last 2 games, 2 of his best of the year. He had 4 20-point games all season long. And 3 of them came in his last 6. 4 of them came in his last 9. Like, he's rounding into form. And again, we talk about the pressure. It's Patrick Mahomes. I think the pressure is going to lead to a bunch of 8 to 15-yard completions and more opportunities for him to run. And again, it's $6K. Let's say we want the 4X number. He just needs 24 points, basically a number he hit both of the last 2, games that he started. I think he's being underlooked. He's supposed to be really low value. The disrespect to have him as the 6 QB is kind of insane. Like, I know Jared Goff's been great. I know he's been indoors. I get it hurts, all this. It's fucking Patty Mahomes. He's $6K. That's what I'm saying. You can play him and Kelce for $11,000. Like, to me, that might be the play. Then you probably can do Barkley Henry. You might could throw in a Nico or somebody.
I don't think either team's going to be able to run the ball in this game.
I don't either.
I think really both. Don't. Again, the questions we're having is how will the O-lines hold up against the D-line? So, I think – now, obviously, this game has a low over-under, and I think for good reason. But, if the offenses are having success, then both quarterbacks, I think, can become interesting plays. Now, obviously, I feel a lot safer going with Patrick Mahomes than I do. A lot
safer.
I know. We saw what happened last year. These teams played in the playoffs, and one team scored a lot of points, and one team did not. So
Mahomes in the divisional rounds, 6-0. 19 touchdowns to 0 turnovers. So he's averaging 3 touchdowns. I think it's like 289 yards per game. I mean, he's basically giving you 24 to 30 points in every divisional round he's ever played. Again, I think I'm shocked. Like, not very many people are talking about him, and I think they should be. Which game do you guys want to do next? You want to save the Washington one for last? You want to do it now?
Let's save it. We started with Ravens Bills. So
we started on the wrong side. The AFC was more intriguing. Rams, Eagles, everything. Like, I would love for Stafford and Bunch to do it. I mean, you want somebody to make you feel like crap as a human being. Sean McVay, going to turn 39. The dude's got an 80-52 overall record in the NFL. He's won a Super Bowl, been to another. His postseason record is now 7-3 or 7-4. In the 8 seasons, 6 of them, he's won double-digit games. He went 9-7 for another one losing record. And to me, that is the only way the Rams win this game is he coaches circles around Sirianni and the Eagles staff, which is possible. I mean, we saw last week the coach of the year.
Fangio, though. It's tough with Vic Fangio.
I get that, but we saw Brian Flores.
That's true.
And a really good coaching staff, like probably the rightful coach of the year. He got outclassed last week by McVay and just the defensive game plan and everything. But overall, if you look at the statistics, the Rams are the weakest team in the NFL across the board left in the playoffs. And the Eagles are the strongest team pretty much across the board. I don't like the Eagles rushing attack. Like they have a huge advantage on the offensive line, defensive line. Same thing for defensive line, offensive line. Obviously, you got Saquon Barkley. The Rams have nobody to cover A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith man-to-man if they blitz and stuff a lot like they did last week. Mm-hmm. It's a tough matchup. Stafford has not been good in outdoor cold weather games for his career. Like he's much better indoors. I would want the Rams to be in this game and this to be good. I just think it would be fast. I want good games this weekend.
Sure.
But everything in my gut's telling me that Philly is really good. And because of their style, which is really ugly and kind of boring, I think people dismiss them as bad. I watched a game last week and saw them just absolutely manhandle a pretty good Green Bay team. Like, no matter what you think, they won 11 games and they quote unquote had a awful game and they were never really in danger. I know the game got to one score in the second half, but I mean, can either one of y'all make a case that the Rams, pull this victory? And if so, how?
To me, it's Jalen Hurts. It's what do we get out of him? Because he's the big question mark, I think, with this Eagles team where, again, they upgraded massively. That's the biggest upgrade you could have. You go from Matt Patricia down the stretch last year to Vic Fangio making your defensive play calls. And then obviously they added a couple of really good guys in that secondary who played awesome as rookies. I think that's the big difference for me between Minnesota and the Eagles is I think Flores was overachieving most of the year with that defense, which I think was a good roster. I think the Eagles have an elite roster and an elite play caller on defense. And that's why, to me, does Hurts mess up? He's better against man than he is against zone. Rams are a heavy zone team. If he makes a key mistake, that can get you into it. But I mean, the problem is, I think you're right. Where I think the Rams' best chance is almost if the game is ugly, but the Eagles are just so much more comfortable in that. In part because they have Saquon Barkley, who absolutely roasted the Rams. I think that was his highest scoring game of the season. Was against the Rams. And
that was in LA.
And that was in LA. And so I want to believe, part of me is kind of I want to pull the trigger because I do have the question about is Hurts going to have an off game? And this Rams team, Sean McVay is so good. When Stafford's on, he's awesome.
But even if they win, do you think that's a big day for Stafford offensively? Do you think or you think that's literally they just have to win, kind of like the game they won in cold weather versus the Jets earlier? 3 weeks ago? It was 12.
One interesting thing I saw was that the Rams have the third highest run rate when they face light boxes, and the Eagles utilize the most light boxes in the entire NFL. So if that plays out, do you just try to steer into that and just go, we're going to churn this out with Kyron? We're going to kind of outdo what you do, but we churn it out with Kyron. Again, you hope you get one big
Stafford beat you on third down.
Stafford and Puka are just making the key plays when you need them. It's possible. I want to pick it. I don't want, as a Giants fan, I definitely don't want an Eagles-Washington conference final.
That would be rough. I didn't even think about that for Cowboys fans. God.
The only upside would be it would anger Cowboys fans maybe more. But I really don't want that. I don't think that will actually happen, but I don't think it's going to be because the Rams win this game. So
it's ironic that I think both teams' approach to winning is one from the standpoint of what the Eagles need to do is to avoid Jared Verse and Fisk and actually put the ball into Saquon's hand and steer away from the Rams' strength. And the Rams, in turn, just like you said, they need to, or they may have to, try to attack on the ground to exploit I won't call it a weakness, but
yeah.
I worry about that secondary for the Eagles in creating the turnover game. And I know that's such a cliche thing. We've said this before. That's where I see the majority of, if the Rams are going to win this game, where they're from a fantasy perspective, I think it's going to be short fields, and I don't see these real long, huge sustained drives personally. And will that be beneficial?
So
it can be.
Would you
Touchdowns
play
are still
Puka?
touchdowns.
I mean, he's really Demarcus Robinson actually is the Rams player I'm putting in the most line. He had 2 touchdowns versus Eagles defense.
Yeah.
Earlier, Cup seems like literally a ghost at this point. I don't know what's going on, but I look at Puka 7,400. I think I'd rather have Collins for 200 more, and I definitely want McLaurin more. And he's $1,100 less, and then you can kind of get into, again, playing Daniels, playing Lamar, playing Allen, playing Henry. I'll have some Puka, but I don't know if I want a ton of. He had a big game last time, but again, the Eagles were getting murdered, and if I remember, most of that came in garbage time.
Yeah, I think he'll deliver market value for what he's going for. I just don't know if it's sometimes that's not the key, though. I mean, granted, yes.
I mean, he's more than like Barkley's more than Henry, which I can't get over. Like that to me is kind of surprising, right?
Well, that's what happens when your first game against a team, you went for 255
That's a good point,
yards
but
and 2 touchdowns.
Henry went for 199 and 2 touchdowns.
Right.
So.
That's not 200.
That's not 255. And actually, he had 47 receiving yards. So he had 302 total yards in that game.
And if I remember, Henry didn't even play the fourth quarter.
That's true. I mean, yeah, they're both. One thing I will say 100%, every lineup, I think you've got to have one of those top 3 running backs. I think you're crazy if you're not putting at least one of those guys in your lineup.
Is that the order you have? Does it go Henry, Barkley, Gibbs, or is it?
How much do we think Montgomery's going to play? That's the deal for me. I mean, they seem like he's full go. If he gets his normal row, it would go Henry, Barkley, Gibbs for me, for sure. If it's going to be more where Gibbs even gets just slightly more than he did the games they played together, I'd rather have Gibbs because Washington really struggles with the run. We'll get into that in a second.
Yeah, I was going to say, you could play both Lions guys. That could be your choice at running back. And I'd be like, cool, sounds good.
The way they use Montgomery in the red zone, well, again, we'll get to that in a second, but I really like his price tag. What pass catcher for the Eagles would you feel good about? Because for me, it's Dallas Goedert. Like, that's where I keep coming to. I know that he didn't have a great game, and we're saying the Rams are really bad. They're like the Chiefs. I mean, just almost everybody has, big games. I didn't feel like A.J. Brown looked healthy last week. Like, that just did not look like the guy he normally he jumps off, the TV screen, in my opinion. That just, oh my God, that's the biggest, strongest, most athletic dude, in the NFL at wide receiver. And if he's like that, we saw it. Goddard had a really good game last week versus Green Bay, who is much better versus tight ends than the Rams are. I think that he's a really good play, and he's under 4K. I think he's 3,900. You can't beat that. Yeah, I would like to play the Eagles receivers, though. Do you like either one of them?
I like Devonta more because A.J. Brown is the guy who just absolutely destroys man defenses, and then Devonta's kind of like the steady, it doesn't matter guy. And the Rams are a heavy zone team, and Devonta's way cheaper. And my big question mark in this game is the Eagle. For the only question mark I have for the Eagles is their passing game.
Is Jalen Hurts going to come to play, basically?
Yeah, and then also just the volume, because that's been an issue all year. And this game, I think, even leads more towards just to trust Saquon to bust one when you need it. So, yeah, if I'm putting an Eagles receiver in, it's Devonta, but I'm with you. I mean, TJ Hawkinson just went for 5 and 64 with a touchdown.
Devonta didn't play against the Rams in their earlier matchup, so they could exploit a lot of stuff, to your point.
Yeah, tight end is the biggest weakness. Outside of Kansas City, no playoff team left is giving up more yardage to tight ends than the Rams on the year. So, and
they're like top 2 among all teams. It's not just the playoff teams. They're literally, again, fantasy rankings and stuff for reception, receiving yards. I meant to mention, because I just noticed Zay Flowers is doubtful now. So, again, that makes me feel even better about the Justice Hill if you want to throw Isaiah Likely. Bateman's very reasonably priced. I think Baltimore's going to lean on the run. If I'm going to play a receiver, pass catcher, I'd probably want one under 5K. Any other thoughts on the Eagles Rams game, Nate? If not, we'll move on to the final game. Do you guys like these defenses here? We hadn't said anything, but I do like the Texans again this week just because they're cheap. We know they get sacks.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to spin down. I can't get there with Washington like I wanted to, but it's just Detroit has been so good at home. Offensively, I can't pull that trigger. But I think both of these defenses, like if I have the money and, it just happens to be a lineup where I got 36, 37, I do like the Eagles a lot this week versus the Rams. But you could also sell me that this Rams defensive resurgence is for real because you look the last 7 weeks, they played more good teams than just the Vikings last week. And they've held a lot of them to low, scoring totals.
I mean, they get pressure. I mean, I remember seeing like a month ago, it was a meme where they took the Moneyball scene where they talk about, we can't replace Giambi, but we can replace him in the aggregate. Mm-hmm. And they just subbed in Aaron Donald. Yeah. And they're like, we can replace him in the aggregate. Where it's just like, I forget what the number was, but it's like they have like 5 guys who have like 25 pressures on the season or something.
And that's
versus the best one, but then it's like you can't just double him and think that'll work because they're coming from everywhere. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that's the key is if they get that pressure, you can force Hurts into some long third downs. Maybe something happens for you. But yeah, when looking at the defenses, yeah, there might be a time where I have money and I go with the Eagles or, Kansas City, I think is properly placed as the most expensive considering again, the problems that Houston O-line has where I think you're probably like, I don't know what the over-under on sacks is, but it should be at least 4.5. I'd say at minimum. But yeah, Texans, really good defense. I know it's Mahomes, so you don't feel great about it, but 2,500. And yeah, I'm with you. I can't do the Commanders. There's no way in Detroit that I'm touching.
No, I wouldn't either. And despite how lackluster the defensive scoring was against the Chiefs last time they played, as far as the lack of sacks and the fact that Mahomes doesn't turn the ball over in the playoffs, I still it's a 41 point total. The likelihood that it doesn't get too out of control, you still like some turnovers, but that pass rush is too good to not assume at least a couple times. And Patrick does a good job of making sure that doesn't happen too often. I'm hoping for 0. But at the same time, I'm a realist, and I understand Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson is a pretty nasty duo.
And when you're dumpster diving for defense, again, we don't chase points for defenses. Right. We just don't. So, and again, if the money's around there, go right ahead. But normally you're going to build lineups where I'd rather spend, say, that extra $1,000 on just taking the Texans and hope they get like 4 sacks. Even if they have a bad game and they get 4 sacks, you'll get like 4 to 6 points, which I mean, what else can you ask for? All right. The main event, as Jorge has here, go Commanders, is Washington, Detroit. I want to start here because I floated this theory with Ryan on ESPN Northwest Florida, but are we sure the NFC North is really good? Because no, just listen for a second. If you look in hindsight, so much of that division being so good was under, the opinion that the Vikings and the Packers were both very good football teams. Like all 3 of them were. Because when you look at what they've done outside of playing each other, it's kind of rough. Like Detroit beat LA with Puka missing the entire second half in overtime at home. I believe every team but Green Bay played Houston without Nico Collins. They got wins, obviously, versus the AFC South. They got, wins, obviously, versus the Bears. I mean, we're talking about this is like 8. And then plus when you bring in for the Lions, the Vikings and the Packers, now we're talking about like 10 of their games. They lost games to the Bills, the Bucks, playoff teams. Part of me wonders, everybody's saying this game, blow out this, blow out that. I think they're going to have trouble defending Jaden Daniels. And what I like about Washington is how long sustained their drives are. Like they get points all the time and they eat so much clock. It's kind of the opposite what you would assume with a high, octane guy like Jaden Daniels. They have the second slowest average touchdown drive in the NFL. Now, the Lions, I think, are third or fourth. So both of these teams have these long sustained drives. But if the game stays close with what we've seen from Jaden Daniels, and I love Jared Goff, right now I would still rather have Jaden Daniels with the game on the line over Jared Goff because of his ability to use his legs. And again, if the Lions bring the blitz like they did last week, Daniels was third in passer rating versus the blitz. He obviously rushed for a lot more yardage. I still think Detroit wins. I think this game's very close, and I am somebody who would not be shocked if Washington wins outright.
Oh, well, I am not on the same page with that. I might agree with you. If this goes real tight at the end of the game, would I maybe feel better about Daniels than Goff? Sure. Like, I like Jared Goff fine. I don't doubt him the way that I was kind of this whole season waiting for the other shoe to drop on Darnold. Mm-hmm. But it's what we saw last year, where it's like if you knock him off his spot, the ball ends up in the dirt. So, there's the chance there, but I just don't think this Washington defense is up for it. I do think, like you said, I think the offense for Washington will have a reasonable amount of success. Yeah, I don't think they fall apart the way that Minnesota offense did in Week 18 with the number 1 seed on the line. But over the last 8 weeks, the Commanders have run man at the second highest rate. Only the Lions have run it more. Jared Goff's third in EPA efficiency against man coverage. Jameson Williams becomes so much more dangerous in these situations. The Commanders run cover 3 at the let me see where I have that number. So the Commanders secondary, 64% of their coverages have either been man coverage or cover 3. Williams 2.58 yards per route run versus those coverages, which is the 10th best of any receiver. So he's more difficult. And then it comes back to the run game.
But are you confident they're going to do that? Because earlier this year versus Tampa, for instance, that was a game they lost by 4 points, 20-16. They threw it 56 times to 27 rush attempts, despite gaining 5 yards per carry. We have seen Ben Johnson at times not stick with the run. And I am a little, because that is the way to beat Washington, almost very similar to Baltimore. Yeah. I actually think Detroit wins this game if they hammer Montgomery and Gibbs, and then to your point, play action to, Williams over the top, Laporta, St. Brown. I do worry though, because again, Washington's so good at these sustained drives that if Detroit doesn't score or has a 3 and out, I could see this game being something where these teams only get 6-7 possessions at their rate and their ability to sustain drives, which again just makes me think it's going to be closer.
I think it'll be close for 2.5 quarters. I think that it's going to be a kind of a tit for tat for the first half. I just don't see one area on any side of anything that Washington is better than Detroit at. And I'm not saying that, this is going to be a blowout.
Left field, purple people eater. I promise you.
Oh, if you're on the field, I'm shocked here. You still wander around under the bleachers, but there's not. And I really, really am impressed with the Commanders team as a whole. I think that this is, over the next couple of years, we're going to have the same conversation about this team, but there's not one area that I find that Washington is better than Detroit at enough offsetting that it's going to allow them to not systematically be down 3 at the end of the first. If this is a projection, they're going to be down 3 at the end of the first quarter and be down, 10 at halftime, and then they lose by 13. So maybe be tied at first quarter, down by 3, down by 10, down by 30. I know that's such a weak projection just because it's like,
what
do you base it on?
Have said that they have Detroit winning. Like, I've been surprised that everybody is saying giveaway. I think it's 9.5 points was the last time I saw, and everybody's hammering the Lions. And again, with the pace of play and the way that, I'm a believer in this Daniels kid now. Like what is the number one quarterback we've seen over and over again? They can almost win these games single-handedly. Like going back to Vince Young beating USC. I'll never forget that, where one dude just flat out beat the best team in football basically by himself. We've seen Josh Allen, versus some really good Chiefs teams, almost beat them with, outside of Stephon Diggs, not really anything. And I do think it's going to be close. And again, Detroit, I hate to say this, but as a Falcons fan, there's winning franchises and there's losing franchises. Falcons, losing franchises. The Vikings last week were reminded again that they just can't have nice things. The Lions historically are another one of these teams. And they have everything set up, to be the number one seed. It would not shock me.
And I think that is exactly why them playing the players they did in the quote unquote meaningless game that everybody was, quick to say that's just, it's not going to happen. They're going to sit everybody at halftime. I believed it. I still think it's true. It wasn't just a one-off scenario. That this was the Detroit Lions way of not only proving it to the public that, hey, we're here, but to prove it to themselves, to say, each game that they win, they feel a little bit more belonging, that they deserve to be there. And I think they still feel like the underdog. And that's a dangerous way to go into a game. It's also scary too, because when you feel like you're the underdog, you try not to make mistakes. And that's usually when you make the mistakes, is when you're trying so hard not to. And but I think that we're now far enough into the season, and I really believe that they feel comfortable. And as long as this game doesn't come down to Dan Campbell doing something stupid. Oh, I know that. I think we all do.
Anytime a team is never, like us, like I'm always rooting for a team that's never won a title. I just worry because I'm telling you, when you've been a fan of a franchise like this forever, I hear what you're saying. I've seen the Falcons, do that. And then, it just happens. It's just
I'm a Blues fan.
Franchise.
I think here would be my question about this, Keith. Is Washington not also a loser franchise at this point? They just had their first playoff win in, what was it, like almost 20 years? It was like 05 or 06 the last time.
They've only played, though, like 8 playoff games in that period.
Well, right, but that's the point.
But I'm saying that what losing franchises are is they never get over the hump. Washington's won 3 Super Bowls. Right, I know it's been forever ago.
The last one was when I was a year old.
That's fine, but they've won them. And you can't deny that whether people were alive or whatever, in the area, those fans, the media, like they remind you of this stuff. I always tell people 28-3. And me and my dad gave a look when they cut it to 16, like, oh shit. We've seen this movie before, and I've been in crowds. That stuff happened.
Franchise. You were playing the dominant franchise of the last 20 years, and then you were the loser franchise. Where again, you're talking about a losing franchise throughout their history, at least post like the 50s. I think
they got rid of Snyder, Joe. They got a lot.
It's a lot of good juju. Yeah,
right now.
But I don't think there's that same amount of like, oh shit, we're fucked type of deal. And the other thing too is, I think probably the best chance Washington has of just 4th down variance goes entirely in their direction, because obviously Campbell will be aggressive. Washington's been like historically, because what was the thing? They've converted like 80% of their 4th downs, Washington, this year.
Yep.
But I also think, like Nate said, Detroit's just better across the board, give or take, if you want to argue Daniels over Goff. And so I think Washington needs.
I think Washington's defense is better than Detroit's.
I still don't think that's true, even with the injuries. But to me, like one of the keys to their victory over Tampa is they go 3 for 5 on 4th downs. I know they didn't take a field goal they could have had, but ultimately
they also contained a really good offense most of that game.
Here's how many 4th downs did Todd Bowles go for last week? Do you know?
I don't. Probably none.
It's 0. And then game on the line, he was like, well, we could go for this 4th and what was it, like 3 or 4?
Mm-hmm.
Or we could tie the game and give the ball back to Jaden Daniels. And he decided to tie the game and go back to Jaden Daniels.
I don't disagree with that call.
I get the idea. It wasn't a horrible call. But Dan Campbell is not going to give them the expected EPA advantage on going for 4th downs. So it's really the chances, maybe they go 4 for 5 and the Lions end up having that same oh my God, San Francisco 4th quarter type of deal where they, go 1 for 4 and that swings the whole game. But I just think you don't have the aggressiveness advantage, and that's kind of one of those things you need if you're the underdog. And so I hate this. I know Philly fans are probably like, that game didn't count, blah, 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 whatever they want to say about the loss to Washington. I think this is the worst matchup Washington could have in the entire playoffs on the NFC side. And so maybe they might cover. It's 9.5. That's a big one. And
so you think Detroit's going to be able to get pressure on him bringing 4? Because again, if they blitz him, I think that's a huge mistake, which is what they've been doing more and more as this season's gone on.
That is true. But
I mean, he's really good versus the blitz, like all season.
I'm not against Jaden Daniels is probably my favorite quarterback play in this whole slate. So yeah, I'm not against you on those score points. I'm at a loss for where they're getting the stops.
So you both say they cover by the 9.5 is what you're saying.
Well, I haven't decided that. I'm still weighing my options there. But it's like if this is 34-24, it's like they'd cover. That'd be a solid game from Washington's offense. But it's like you still lost by 10.
That's the other thing. I actually think it's going to be a little lower scoring than people think because, again, these teams have very long drives. I looked it up. It was true. Washington's second longest average scoring drive, Detroit fourth longest. So,
and you felt that last week. You
yes.
felt that last week in that Tampa Bay. It really screwed up a lot of my plays because I wanted the points. And it was like, gosh darn it, a 9-minute drive. What is this?
I feel better, though, in the dome because there's so many more, no offense to Tampa, but they and again, Tampa, in my opinion, they just fed Bucky more. They had a great chance of winning that game. That's my biggest fear for what you guys are saying is Detroit does come out and just early, especially run it down their throat,
which is
and then start opening up the play action and et cetera. So, all right. So the plays here again, Daniel's 7K for me is a lock. His last 6 games now on DK, 22 points or more. He's throwing multiple touchdowns every game. I think he's got 450 rushing yards in that span. And again, if Detroit blitzes, that's only going to open up the rushing opportunities for him, which that's where he has those home run games. If he can have 60, 70 yards and a touchdown. I love pairing him with Terry McLaurin. Detroit gives up the most passing yards in the NFL to go routes per game. Terry McLaurin has been fantastic, the second best wide receiver in football this year in go routes and corners, and actually has the most yards of any wide receiver in the NFL on just go routes. Outside of that, on the Washington side, you can convince me maybe to play Eckler if you think that they're going to, need him to, catch more balls and do more of the running. But overall, I like the Daniels McLaurin stack. And then on the Detroit side, I'm trying to either put St. Brown or Gibbs in a line, and most of my lineups, one of those two. But Joe's convincing me on Jameson. I'm going to definitely put him in some lineups. But Sam Laporta is the most owned Lions player for me. Huge transformation for him in the second half. I want to make sure I get this right because it's pretty wild the difference in his usage the second half of the season. So in his first 11 games, he had 3 games with 6 targets or more, 1 game with 5+ receptions, only 3 games of 50+ receiving yards, 3 touchdowns, and 3 games with double-digit points on DK. His last 6 games, 6+ targets in all of them, 45 total in that time. 4 games with 5 receptions more, 4 games with 50+ receiving yards, more touchdowns with 4 in those last 6 than the previous 11, and scored double-digit points in all of them. And Washington has had issue with tight ends. Overall, their numbers look pretty good, but if you look, there was a lot of games where, good tight ends kind of ate up on them. And again, they use Laporta a lot in the play action pass. If they're running, I really like that play. Which guys are you, honing in? Obviously, probably a good bit of them from this game.
Diami Brown. Yeah, sorry. Diami Brown's another interesting one for me. I'm obviously concerned by the fact that he played well last week, and I'm 95% certain.
It'll be the Zacchaeus back.
Yeah, I don't think Diami Brown in his 4 seasons in the NFL has ever had 2 productive games back to back.
Well, so I know his best game ever. You called.
Yeah, but he leads Washington in yards per route run against man. His target rate goes up 5%. His fantasy points per route run more than doubles. And Detroit runs the most man in the entire NFL. And again, I think they're going to be like Nate. I think they're losing probably this entire game. So pro passing game script. So yeah,
I think you're supposed to say earmuffs when you say that for Jorge, bro.
I mean, I think at this point, the majority of Commanders fans, obviously you hope to win, but it's this is all icing on the cake at this point.
Right.
It's year 1 with your rookie quarterback and your new head coaching staff, new owners. It's all new.
Yep.
And you're in the second round of the playoffs. So But yeah, Diami Brown at that price point, 3,900. I think he's super interesting. Ertz has also been better against man defenses. So, 4,000, even though I know Detroit's been pretty good against tight ends. I think there's an argument there, but I think I'm probably with you on, I like Dallas Goedert more for 100 less. So yeah, I mean, I think you can load up on those wide
If you
receivers.
play Daniels, though, it's the same thing you told me last week, right? You got to play McLaurin with him if you play Daniels, especially at 6,600.
Considering, yeah, he's the clear number one, and then every other team that has a clear number one, that guy is $700 or more expensive than Terry McLaurin.
3 of his 4 10+ target games have came in his last 6 too, which I
Yeah,
like to see that.
I don't think you want to, unless maybe if you're playing in some massive field and you just want to be like, hey,
Contrarian,
this is going to be super different. I'm going like Zacchaeus and Diami Brown and watch what happens. But yeah, I think Terry McLaurin, if you're in any smaller, if you're in any cash game, 100%. If you're going Daniels, go McLaurin.
You guys worried about Montgomery, Nate? Would you? Because again, he's 5,700, and we've seen he gets most of the inside the 5 carries. Like when those guys are.
So are you asking? Are you asking if we're worried about how he undercuts Gibbs, or we're worried that like
I'm more worried about like him? Is he because he's an automatic start if you think that he's
getting the normal snaps.
And if he's healthy, right? Like I want to, because he is somebody that I know people think of him more as the Thunder, but Montgomery's pretty, explosive as well. Like that's what makes him is he both is kind of that tank and he's got a little bit of an engine too. I am concerned that was supposed to be a like season-ending injury, and then now he's back. And like they knew he was going to play a week ago. I just wonder, is this something where he'll be used strictly for like short yardage situations? And they still, because I mean, Gibbs has been incredible in the time that he's been out. Or do you think it goes right back to kind of their, hot hand approach? So where each of them though is at least going to get 40% of the snaps.
That I don't see happening. I mean, no. I think there's a more likely chance that Detroit gets up big enough that
to where he's not
even in the game anymore, and it's just Gibbs. And I'm not saying that I think that's going to happen. I think that there's
that's a good point though. That I could definitely see
why risk it at that point with the banged up guy.
Yeah, I could see that happening more than I could see even in a close game it being a 50-50 or a 55-45 split. I think that Gibbs will dominate the majority, but that doesn't make him a bad play, because even if you eliminate the in between the 20 work and all he is strictly goal line, a score and 30 yards. I guess, what is he? 50, what'd you say?
We've seen those Jerome Betts games, like for the Steelers back in the day where he'd have 6 carries for 5 yards and 2 or 3 touchdowns.
Absolutely, we have. Yep.
Didn't he finish that one game with negative yardage?
Yes,
he did.
3 scores. Yeah. That's when you just like, I hate fantasy football. I really, really do. Do you have any interest in the Washington backs? Either one of you guys?
I mean, the price point, you could convince me, but
Robinson's been awful for like now 2 months. That's why, I think I'd do Eckler, right? If I was going to do one of them.
I think so too, because again, I do think they will be down, so he's probably the better play. But I think I'm with you, where if I'm going super cheap, like Justice Hill is kind of the guy who most stands out to me as a play that I like. So that's.
Do you like the Ty Johnson one too? I didn't ask you. Do you like Johnson as well? Because again, a lot of that is Ray Davis being out.
Yeah,
I just think that means he's going to get more rush attempts. Plus, we know he's their pass catching back.
I mean, Buffalo and Baltimore give up over 40 yards per game receiving to running backs, and none of the other playoff teams left give up.
Getting close.
So it's pretty easily the 2 worst at that. So yeah, I'm with you. If I'm going cheap, I'll take a shot on some pass catchers in the mini Super Bowl that we're having there. Over trying to go with a Washington team where one guy's been insanely inefficient, and again, like you said, Eckler, you could talk me into it, but it's just like he's probably playing more snaps than Ty Johnson and Justice Hill, you'd assume, but it's not a dissimilar role, and he's more expensive, so I don't love it.
What do you think about Goff, Gibbs, and Williams for $29,900? You start with that as the base of your lineup. Because again, if you guys are saying Detroit so much, I do think that Goff is obviously going to have a good game. I know they could run a lot, but typically when Detroit runs the ball really well, then the play action just gets ridiculous because teams are doing everything they can to stop it. To your point, how much man that they run, Jameson Williams. Which one do you like more? Do you like Williams at 6,100 or St. Brown at 72? 72.
That is a tough one for me.
Right?
Yeah, I know.
I don't want to. It feels like if I don't say St. Brown, then he's going to like have 12 catches.
Oh, it's always the way it is. Every time I've ever shied away from him, he has 12 catches.
Yeah, I do like the matchup for Jameson, and yeah, I don't think that Ben Johnson's going to outsmart himself in this one. I do think they're going to lean heavily on the run, which means I like the guy who's more likely to have the really big play if the number of pass attempts is going to be relatively low for a high scoring game.
Yeah.
So I would lean Jameson, but obviously, yeah, if someone wants to put St. Brown in there, I'm not going to.
And I'm sorry, it was for 21,000. I don't know why I said 29,000. I can't do math. What about the Gibbs Montgomery pair for 13-4? Because to me, that's intriguing. If you really think the Lions, do it with the run, you get all of the Gibbs, say, in between the 20s. And then if it does turn into a Montgomery couple of, and again, I'm talking about MME. Obviously, I would not play two backs out of the same backfield in cash game lineups, but I do think that's a way to differentiate yourself. Not too many people are probably going to go with that. Also, like doing the same thing with Henry and Justice Hill. And
I think that that tandem is third on the list of teams. Yeah. I would do them. I would do Barkley and Kenneth Gainwell before I would do Montgomery, just for the money at least.
Yeah,
not if they were all the exact same dollar amount, but
if a weekly fantasy was still happening, we wouldn't be saying bench David Montgomery to put in Kenneth Gainwell.
Exactly.
Well, if it were, we probably wouldn't be.
No one would be listening to us
for too much longer.
Exactly.
We got a great question from Purple People Eater, and then we'll let you guys get it. I appreciate y'all spending so much of your time with us. He wants us to rank
just straight up
the QBs left in the playoff, and we need to set some parameters here. We're saying, I say we say overall for football, right?
Yeah, if they're on my team and I'm in the divisional round going forward, who do I
Can
want?
we all be in agreement that because we're, again, talking about real football, I can't not have the dude with 3 Super Bowl victories already and going for a third straight as the top guy. And I'm not even trying to, make Nate feel good or anything. Like, that's just, I'm as big of a Lamar fan as anybody.
This is a different season. This is
Patrick Mahomes. Until somebody takes him down, nobody on this list, because Brady, who is the GOAT right now, is the only guy that's beat that dude in the playoffs, right? Isn't it?
Well,
period. Burrow once. And Burrow's really freaking good. So it's
the reality is at least 2 of those games, and even the very first one, because they were down 20-0 at halftime, it was honestly more the defense. I mean, that Super Bowl against the Bucs doesn't even really count. Like, he had no offensive line, and it was I honestly thought he kind of played amazing in that game. I came away more impressed with Patrick Mahomes.
I did too. I remember we talked about that, and we're like, can we say that, Joe, or people think we're crazy?
Yeah, they score like 9 points. You're like, I think he played awesome.
Yep. If Kelsey catches the ball, if there were 3 other, there were 3 other drop passes, and he had at least a semblance of time in the pocket. And there was the most penalties called against a team, I think, in Super Bowl history. Not that I'm using that as an excuse, but I'm saying,
right.
I mean, they're mental mistakes. They're killing themselves. It was just a bad football game.
And Brady was surgical in that game, if I remember. Like, just typical Brady, keep the ball away.
Incredible to watch.
All right, so we're good with that.
Yeah.
This is where it gets difficult for me. I am the biggest Lamar fan in the world. I think he's the most talented quarterback in football. But because Allen has done more in the playoffs, I have to give him a slight edge over Lamar. Now, if Lamar wins on Sunday, I think then you could basically swap them, and that's not crazy. But he just needs to have one of those big victories over another stud QB, because so far in his career, that has not happened. It's been, people like CJ Stroud, Justin Herbert, very talented quarterbacks, but not anywhere near like the elite top of the top, right?
Right. Yep.
We saw him go toe to toe with Mahomes when Mahomes was playing an A+ game.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you didn't come away being like either guy was better. It's like they're both awesome. I feel blessed to have watched this football game.
Absolutely.
And yeah, we haven't seen that from Lamar. So yeah, I think you can argue that Lamar should win MVP this year and he should have 3 MVPs already and blah blah blah. And at this point, yeah, I would still lean Josh Allen in this situation. Which is yeah, it's not disrespect. We're talking about Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen.
So Lamar's third. So I'm gonna let Joe. Who you got it for? This is actually the hardest probably place on the board. So go ahead, Joe. That's why I call you Joe the Brain.
I bet I'm going to agree with Joe, though. I think that we're both going to say the same person.
Oh, that's interesting. Because I wasn't sure, and then I thought about it a little more, and he hasn't been as consistent this year as I maybe would have liked, but it's just one of the things you have to have is you got to have a guy who can play an A+ couple of weeks. Like, I mean, shit, Nick Foles did it. Eli Manning did it. You don't have to be the best week in, week out if you have a hot streak. And if Matthew Stafford is on a hot streak, I gotta put him in there. He's done it before for one. And yeah, I mean, you saw what he looked like last week against Minnesota, where if he's on, you're in trouble.
He went in Detroit last year, Joe.
And
gave them all
he got
they
close.
could have.
And even when you think he just made a huge mistake,
team.
They review it and they go, you know what? He actually did throw that ball 1 foot forward. And it's an incomplete pass, and it's not even grounding because Puka was 2 feet away. So
I agree with you. I can't disrespect the guy that's won a Super Bowl. I can't. Like, is that Nate? You fair with that?
I'm 100% behind that. I don't like the matchup necessarily. I don't know if I would say they're going to win, but that's not the scenario.
Yeah, we're just saying the best.
I think he's playing the best defense that's left, so it could go wrong this week. But
Nate, give me number 5.
Number 5 is the one that is tricky because we use the parameter of winning as a reason for our scaling. And this is a person who hasn't played long enough to be winning and be there. But this was a close one for me between this last one, because I could have, if you said Jaden Daniels at 4, I wasn't going to really throw up a stink. But the only caution that I had is I'm going through the names and it's like, okay, we got so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so. It's like, man, this time last year, CJ Stroud was in a situation where we thought it can only go up from here. Right. And obviously injuries and a number of other factors have gone into the season. I'm not going to say Stroud's done and that this is a wash. He's now a bust all of a sudden.
He's been let down by a bad offensive line and inconsistent play calling. And then again, all the injuries at receiver, for sure.
Absolutely. So I have Jaden Daniels there just because I feel like the two areas that a rookie quarterback typically struggles in is third down completion and turning the ball over. And Jaden Daniels has done a really good job of both of those two things, which I think is probably one of the more difficult things to grasp early, especially with such, new everything. Like we said, it's a whole new everything, new ownership, new team. Defense has had, after last year, when they got rid of Montez Sweat and they made all the moves, I thought this team is 4 years away, no matter who they have at quarterback.
I thought they would be awful.
100%. Even if we could go back in time and you're like, all right, Nate, we can go put money on Washington. We know they're going to make the divisional round. I'd still be like, I don't know if I trust it. I know we watched it, but I still don't know. It's hard to believe, but I'm really excited for the future for that franchise, at least.
Yeah. Daniels among QBs this year, 12th in accuracy rating, 7th in true completion percentage. He's 11th to the red zone completion percentage, 12th pressure completion percentage, clean pocket 7th, QBR 3rd, EPA 6th, 8th in true passer rating. And then, first for completion versus zone, 7th in man coverage throw versus rate. The one that I really love is his catchable pass rate. He's 8th, almost 80% of his throws. And then the difference between Daniels and the rest of these guys, especially for Hurts, and I think it's because he's injured, but just the rushing deal. He was first in carries, second in the red zone, the second in rushing, 927. He reminds me so much of Lamar, but he's so much further along. Now, granted, the age difference of when they came to the NFL plays a little bit of a role here. I know Daniels, I think, is a year and a half older than Lamar was, but he's just so poised for a guy that has that other gear. I mean, that freaking fourth down play last week, he so calmly kind of just stepped to the side, juked to the side, and then easily got the first down to where it looked like in real time. I'm not going to lie. I thought he was going to get tackled, and the guy really didn't even come close to him.
Absolutely.
And then on top of that, you got a guy that's crazy accurate on top of all of that. 6 has got to be Jalen Hurts, right? I mean, he's led a team to a Super Bowl. Like I have a hard time.
It's a good argument. Obviously, to the point I said earlier, we've seen him go toe to toe with Patrick Mahomes.
And
ironically, by far his best playoff game of his career. I think he averages 170 passing yards in Eagles postseason wins while he's been there. Crazy.
And I think that's kind of my issue is that's the difference between him and Daniels to me is that I just feel like it's a lot easier to game plan for Jalen Hurts.
No, that's definitely sure. I think, especially again, when he's right now, he doesn't look like he can run. And so, I mean, that was a scary concussion that he took a couple of weeks ago. So who would you put here then, Joe? Because I could be persuaded. Would you have Goff, who again, what did we talk about? I think the last show of the year, Joe, was Goff has once again earned, a lot of praise, and he deserves it because we all doubt him. We all say he can't do it. Like, what do we all say going into that Chicago game, right? Outdoor. Well, I know he's played phenomenal now for basically 2 straight years, but he can't do it outdoors. And he went out there and cooked what was a pretty good Bears defense most of the season. I would be so happy for Goff because I went to that Super Bowl,
I'd be happy.
Rams versus Pats, and I don't know if there's ever been a Super Bowl where a quarterback just looked like he got absolutely, they knew Belichick picked out every weakness in his game and threw it at him to the point that 2 years later, they traded him, to this Detroit team, and Detroit's built him back up. I could definitely make a case. For me, Stroud's got to be last because he's a second-year guy. Again,
Keith, I'm going to let you guys take this over. I just got a
Nate.
I got to run. You guys, thank you for having
so
me.
much, Nate. Man, I appreciate you, buddy.
No problem.
Have fun tomorrow, bro.
Will do.
All right, be safe. What do you think, Joe?
I'm going the opposite direction. I'm putting Stroud at 6.
Oh, you are going to put Stroud at 6.
Here's my thing, and your point. All your points are very reasonable. Like we said, we've seen Hurts do it. We actually have not seen Goff do it. Obviously, this early, we have not seen Stroud do it. But the easiest thing for me is just going, if I swapped the situations Goff and Stroud are in, do I think Stroud could do what Goff's doing? And I think there's a reasonable chance. I don't know that it would because Goff's running that offense at a very high level. I don't think Goff would be. I think that would be just catastrophic if he had to play behind that offensive line in Houston. And especially if he was down to just the one good receiver and a play caller who's addicted to – he actually got away from it in the first half there, and that kind of keyed their offense to where they got the lead and then were able to go back to the run. But addicted to running the ball on, first down and then being like, well, 2nd and 9, we better run again to make sure we're in a manageable 3rd and 7. So, yeah, I would roll the dice, and I would go with Stroud.
I'm okay with that. As you can see, I am not good
We're moving
on. I can't figure it out. I swear to God, I've pushed every 2-person box that there is. You would think that eventually, if you just keep pushing buttons, you get something right. That is, in fact, not true, Joe Matz. Whoever said that is a liar. I'm okay with that. I think I figured it out, Joe. Let's see. Hey. Who says you can't teach an old dog new tricks?
That's right.
All right, so I'll allow it. We'll put Stroud there because I want us to agree on this. So then, do you go Goff or Hurts then? Who's more limited? It's probably Hurts, right?
I mean, that's kind of why I lean Goff because I love a quarterback who can move because who doesn't in this day and age? But I would still generally rather have, especially if I'm a playoff team, because presumably I have a good roster, give or take what Houston's working with on offense right now. And if I have a good roster, I'd rather have a quarterback who's less limited passing the ball than I would a guy who's less limited running. Now, obviously, if you end up in a situation where your offense is overmatched, you'd rather have Hurts because he can make plays out of structure. But I would just say I'll go with Goff because, again, if I swap situations, those are like the two best offensive lines in football. They both have awesome playmakers around them. And in that situation, I'll take the distributor. So I would lean Goff, but those are just polar opposite players with
I agree.
With reversed limitations.
It's a good group of QBs too. I would argue all 8 of them are in the top like 12 in the NFL. And again, I think the Eagles love being where they're at because everybody's kind of sleeping on the Eagles. And I really do believe top to bottom, best roster of the 8 teams remaining. Like they've got blue chippers everywhere. And the most important thing is on the offensive and defensive lines, which I feel like that.
And Detroit would maybe have an argument if they were alive.
If they were healthy, but they're not.
Hutchinson's out there, number 1 overall. Like that's the biggest difference there. Where the Eagles are pretty damn healthy, and that roster is stacked as it is almost every year. Good job, Howie Roseman. You might be the best GM in football.
Jerk.
Super annoying, but yeah.
Send some of your picks to the Falcons and the Giants.
Let us have some. Even though if we're always picking ahead of them, so on us. But
all right, let me real quickly give you like 2 lineups I've built. Tell me if you like or don't like either one of them, and then we'll get out of here. Because I spent way too much time last night building lineups. This one, I kept going back and forth, but ultimately I was like, screw it. I'm going to run with it. I feel like that was the thought process. So we've got Daniels, and I went with the double Ravens. I went with both Hill and Coleman. And this one, I went McLaurin, St. Brown. I may end up tinkling around and getting Jameson in there instead, but you'll see this a heavy Detroit Washington one, so I'm leaning into it's a shootout. Kelsey, Laporta, and the Eagles D.
Kelsey, Laporta. Run that through one more time.
You got it.
I got
Daniels
for a second thinking about
Henry, Justice Hill, so the 2 Ravens backs.
Right.
So let's just do it this way. From the Washington game, I got Daniels, McLaurin, St. Brown, and Laporta.
Okay.
Baltimore, Buffalo, Henry, Hill, Coleman, and then the single pieces from the other 2 games where I just have the Eagles defense and I just have Kelsey from the Chiefs game.
Okay. I feel pretty good about that. I mean, again, I think we got to get at least always 4 guys from the Washington Detroit game, which we did. So
you think that's the number? Is at least 4? Is that like seriously?
Yeah, I think you can go up and down. Again, it's like you said earlier, where if we're in a field of 50,000 people, we probably want to have a little more outreach here and there. Whereas if you're in a cash game and you threw 5 guys in there, get your burger and fries and feel good about it. So yeah, I just think, you got to be heavy on that game. Of course, I said that last week about the Washington game, and then
depending on what pieces you went, it was not awful.
That's true. And I mean, again, if you just differentiate it in the right way, where if you put Ladd and Nico in, and then you were feeling awesome, which that was an annoying one because I was like, I hate this game, but if you put Ladd or Nico in, I get it. And I was like, damn it! Like if only I played only 2 guys, I would have even thought about it. One
thing that I told you that was an automatic for me with the way he's been playing.
You were right.
This one again, it's very similar, but a little different pieces. It's Daniels, McLaurin's the only pieces from Washington.
Right.
For Detroit, I go Gibbs, Williams. So I go for the explosive plays there on both of them.
I like that.
Have Henry and Likely as the Ravens in that lineup. Again, I am all in on the Keon Coleman and Johnson.
Like
so again, I got the 2 pieces for the Bills of Coleman and Johnson and the Rams defense. Okay. I feel pretty good about that. So I guess
maybe my biggest question is: are you generally just not going Saquon? You're going Gibbs or Henry?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm going Henry. Most lineups I've gone
Going Henry.
Henry is the only one. Like you can see, I obviously had Gibbs in that one.
Yeah.
But it's just.
But he's because of the big three running backs on this slate.
So
that's real. Okay.
Expansive, you know what I mean? Like it's sort of a it's hard to stomach, in my opinion, otherwise, especially when there's backs that I know I want to play. At least in my opinion. And so the other lineup again that I've been, tinkering with and trying to figure out the right combo, but I do like the upside of this is I go all in with the Chiefs, where I go Mahomes, Worthy, and Kelsey.
The price point's pretty good.
It's really good.
Yeah.
And I'll kind of show you the flexibility that you have with this lineup in a second. And then again, from the Buffalo-Baltimore game, I have peace. Because I think even with the weather, there's going to be points scored in this game. I really do. And again, so. Henry, who what's up, Robert? Henry is 100% somebody that I'm going to play him. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but he's 200 less than Barkley. He's only 400 more than Gibbs. And I really think Baltimore is going to come out and try to do the exact game plan that they did last time in Buffalo.
Right.
Again, I got Johnson for Buffalo. Now, if Davis ends up being cleared, I will not be this heavy on Johnson. But with Davis out, I just think when you
makes it easier.
The extra, rush attempts probably plus passing game. This is where this lineup gets really different. I've got Bateman right now as my flex.
I don't hate
and
it.
Because I'm running Worthy, Kelsey, Mahomes, obviously I got to go with Nico Collins. I got to run it back with the Texans. If you think the Chiefs are going to have a big day, be scoring points, that's just going to mean Collins is either going to have a great game, because if Houston's keeping up, you'd think he's having a lot to do with it, or it's one of those deals where it's just hope you get a bunch of garbage points, right? Late.
Right.
And then right now I have Devontae Smith. That's that other receiver, but I have enough money in this lineup that, again, we could play J-Mo. Do you think in that situation where this is already a little bit of a risky lineup because, you're going all in with the lowest scoring game, right? I'm going in with 4 pieces from that one. Do you then take a probably less volume play in Jameson Williams?
Right.
Or do you, but obviously we know what he can do when he gets that volume. Or do you run Devontae Smith, who again didn't play them, but overall versus zone, he doesn't really take a hit at all on his target rate and a lot of his measurables and stuff. He's the same across the board. And I just think he will get a little bit more involved, especially if the Rams are getting pressure.
That's interesting, because I think overall with the price point, I would lean Devonta in general, but here we're not trying to save money.
Or would you go down and say play a Zacchaeus, a Dotson, which
what's the change we're making?
Brown's huge change. Brown's 3,900.
Right.
We can then play AJ Brown, Kyron Williams, James Cook, Joe Mixon. You could go even cheaper, for instance.
So who are we swapping out for them?
You're talking about from De'Ami Brown? Right now, I had either Devontae Smith or why am I blanking all of a sudden? Or J-Mo would be what I had.
So if we're dropping down on,
it would be to spin up at that flex
position
where I had Bateman, and it would make obviously a huge difference. Like if I went down and grabbed Curtis Samuel, who's another guy that again because of the go routes and some of the data on Baltimore, you can then now get all the way up to Puka, St. Brown, AJ Brown, etc.
Right.
And actually, if I go even down, we're going to do that. Go down to the Texans. I know that seems counterintuitive, but it's possible it sacks, whatever. Again, there's only 8 defenses to pick, and I'd rather spend the money elsewhere.
Absolutely.
Now I can get all the way to Gibbs as well.
Ooh. Getting all the way to Gibbs.
Which is a game I don't have any Detroit, right? So
Oh shit, we don't have any. Oh, because so Jameson would have been our Detroit.
Well, again,
play.
this is a game where I'm actually going away, kind of like
right. You're trying to be counterintuitive.
Correct.
I still think we got to have somebody from Detroit, and I don't want anyone more than I want Jahmyr Gibbs. So
that's what you would do.
That's my lean there.
So
I didn't hate the original lineup because I do like Devonta and Jameson, and I think Bateman is a reasonable play. Although, I mean, isn't Bateman probably the guy who's getting the most Stingley? Isn't that the most likely?
More than likely. And I mean, the other thing I guess I could do potentially.
Don't love Bateman there then.
Let's see. If we went with, and again, if I went with likely, you could get Puka or St. Brown instead of Gibbs, like out of that flex, or Curtis Samuel, either one of them.
I would rather have Gibbs than Puka or St. Brown this week.
All right.
Like last week we were all in on Puka, and this week I'm like, this is not the ideal matchup.
So in this, again, at this point though, it would be Curtis Samuel over, because like it'd be Curtis Samuel, Mac Hollins is really the only option that you can feel
do that
even remotely
right.
strong
That's
about.
pretty iffy, but
or again, we could actually take out Johnson. I didn't think about that. Let's throw Gibbs in, and that's the two backs. Let's go to Coleman, who again I really like this week, 4,100. There's your piece of Buffalo. Oh, okay. Now we're talking. Okay. So I do like this lineup all of a sudden.
So run it through for me one last time.
Let me get this thing going. So we got Mahomes.
Yeah.
With Worthy and Kelsey.
Right.
Gibbs, Henry.
Mm-hmm.
We're running back Collins because, again, Kansas City scores points. Might as well go all win it. Take Nico coming back.
Oh, I got confused there for a second. I just wanted to go back because I was mixing up games because Stingley's playing Kansas City. So
okay.
So actually I do kind of like Rashad Bateman again. Yeah, I was like, wait a second, that was completely wrong.
So
but I still
what do you think about this lineup though? Okay. Of again, Mahomes, Worthy, Kelsey, Gibbs, Henry, Coleman, Collins, Texans D, and then again we can go Goddard, De'Ami Brown, Kincaid's in that range. Where would you go? Who do you kind of like out of that?
So it's what's our max price point here?
3,900.
3,900. So anyone 3,900. I mean, yeah, I think it would be either Goddard or De'Ami Brown for me. I think it would for sure be one of those two guys.
This part of me really does wonder if you just load up with Zacchaeus this week. Because if you look before last week,
right,
he had such a run.
He had
of, I think it was 3 games in a row where he was being hyper targeted. He only saw 3 targets last week, but again, that was the game. Daniels didn't throw that much. So, but I think just so we can close this thing out right now, and I'm sure I'll change it 50 times before we start. Don't tinker too much. I'm going to go with Goddard just because.
Right. Sounds good.
I do think that we saw last week they're going to target him more because Hurts just doesn't look the same pushing it down the field. What we're talking about, you get pressure, more underneath stuff. So that would be the Mahomes, Gibbs, Henry, Coleman, Collins, Worthy, Kelsey, Goddard, Texans. Joe, you got anything you want to plug before we get out of here? And just for shits and giggles, Joe, I threw that into the $1 million for first lineup. Let's go.
Love it. Not really. I mean, just enjoy the last really kind of fullish week of football, because obviously conference championship, we do get the 2 big games, but
dark days ahead, my friend.
Yeah, we get 2 days. This is generally for me, I think, the highlight, because now we're more or less down to the true contenders. And I mean, again, we're getting Ravens Bills, which is awesome. And
I'm very excited about the night games.
What's that?
We get on 3 nights in a row. Daniels, versus the Lions, like the most fun rookie in a few years at QB versus the best team probably in football this season. Then you get Ravens, Bills, and then even though I'm not thrilled about the teams playing, we then get the national championship on Monday. Like that's a good 3-day weekend, especially with a holiday. Hello.
Yeah, you're right.
Thank
you. I do not have to go to work.
Martin Luther King. Very well deserved holiday, man.
Yeah, Arizona tried to resist. Thankfully, after everyone's like, "We're going to boycott you because this is insane," they came around in the 90s, and now we all get to celebrate it. So
God, did they really do that? They waited that long? I did not.
I can't remember if they pulled the Super Bowl from Arizona or if they just threatened to. But yeah, I mean, I think there was something like we just don't want there to be another holiday. It's another day off, and that's wasteful of the government. But it was like, I don't know, guys. Kind of hard not to come off racist if you're trying to deny Martin Luther King Day.
And I mean, let's just be honest. At the end of the day, who's going to be pissed about getting a national holiday and a day off of work? Like, because if it's a job that falls by federal, state, type laws, like they have to give you vacation or pay you overtime. So that's good for everybody. I mean, forget about how you feel about Martin Luther King, but how can you not feel for a person that literally spread a message that more people need these days?
It should be obvious. Yeah.
Open, dialogue and peace is the way to get to where you want to go, rather than violence and lying and just all the other crazy shit that goes on in the world. So you're a good man, MLK. So but this has been fun. We will be live tomorrow at 1 p.m. with Chris Robin on the Fantasy Six Pack channel doing this whole dance over again. We'll be concentrate a little bit more on cash, and I'm sure we'll talk some of our favorite like prop plays, because Chris is big time into the gambling. That's always fun. But for Joe and Keith, actually real quickly, don't forget to check out all the amazing work on Fantasy and Frames. Yeah. Follow them on all social media channels. There's a ton of good stuff up on the website, YouTube channel. We got Facebook, MySpace, you name it, we got it all.
And a lot of draft stuff always coming up.
That's right. So, well, I'll be going to Senior Bowl in 2 weeks. Let's go.
There we go.
So I will miss you, Joe, but me and Alan are still going. People are going to be calling us Robin Big again. They're like, look at that big black guy with that little white guy. It's Robin Big. So especially with my hat on backwards. But we will, again, we'll be here for 2 more weeks. You're not getting rid of us. We'll be there for conference title game, be there for Super Bowl, building single game slates. But we appreciate all y'all who stuck around to the very end.
Yes.
We'll see you guys soon.